People can turn a profit with criminal electricity prices, not only here, but anywhere in the world. We will dive into Bitcoin mining, data centers, and Bitcoin hosting. Peors, how are people making money mining Bitcoin with such high electricity prices?
Well, the truth, Sean, is that most of them are not. And I do spend quite a bit of my day trying to make sure that people who are interested in mining are very conscious of that reality prior to engaging in it. So probably the first question I would ask people that are approaching us for advice on how to start a mine would be, what's your motivation? What's your rationale for getting into Bitcoin mining?
So I know there's about 195 countries in the world. Australia sits at 138 for the most expensive places in the world to mine electricity. When people are approaching someone like yourself, instead of what you're saying, just plugging in at home, are they getting cheaper electricity rates, or is it just that it's all in one secure location?
Yeah, so definitely I've seen a wide variety of different installations of Bitcoin mining sites in Australia and, in fact, in other countries as well. And you're absolutely right. It's quite rare to find a clean, well-filtered, safely set up mine site. There are quite a few mine sites that I've observed that are quite dangerous, quite frankly, in terms of their setup. So where you have ineffective wiring, ineffective heat regulation, and these are potentially house fires ready to happen. And then, of course, you have the situation where the miner might be living in a home environment or a business environment where the neighbors or even their family members are not happy about that activity taking place in the family home or in the business environment. And so if they're still keen and still desperate to get involved in the mining business, then at least, we've been able to offer a facility where, sure, they may be paying close to residential rates for the power component, but they can at least sleep easy knowing that the mine is in a properly ventilated, properly secured, and properly hosted environment.
Awesome. Peors, I'm going to link a video below for everyone with your data center there. I can bring it up. But who is Peors and what's MineRacks? What's this company that you're the face of here?
So really, it's started off as a hobby in that I wanted to learn a lot more about Bitcoin because I'd heard about it but didn't really understand it. And I was asked to give a presentation on Bitcoin, and embarrassingly, I discovered more and more that I knew not enough about it in order to be able to provide that presentation and know what I was talking about. So I started down the Bitcoin journey by, I guess I'm a software developer by trade, so I started reading the GitHub source code available on GitHub of Bitcoin itself, reading several books that explain at a technical level how Bitcoin works. And then I started building a node to try and understand how nodes operate on the network. So starting with an Umbral node on a Raspberry Pi, and then I wanted to understand how mining worked. So I built a small mine. I met a fellow who had already built a GPU-based mine, and I learned from him how to actually build my own mine. And then my wife made it extremely clear to me that I was not allowed to have one of these things at our home. And as it turned out, you can see the office behind me was a rental property that we had that had gone vacant, and this was during the COVID time, so there was absolutely no way we could lease it at that time. And so we thought, well, I'll put my mine in there until we find a tenant. And of course, one thing about Bitcoin mining I can tell you is it's extremely addictive. Once you've got one, you don't stop at one. You end up very quickly with 3, and then very quickly with 10. And then you move on to ASICs, which are the larger, more power-hungry units. And before you know it, you've got an entire electrical project going on. I found some rack units, and I've been knocking around data centers for 20 years or so as a customer of data centers. And I realized it's possible that other people are facing a similar dilemma to me, and that they want to get into mining, but there's no sort of safe, credible on-ramp into the industry. Many of the people that are offering mining services, it's a case of don't verify, trust. Whereas I wanted to give an experience more akin to the philosophy of Bitcoin itself, in that I wanted people to be able to not have to trust, but were able to verify. So to this day, I believe we're one of the only data centers that support Bitcoin mining, which support visits for the general public that are interested. So we actually do have a facility on our website where people can book in and come and visit our facility and check it out, because there are quite a few Bitcoin mines around Australia, but almost all of them are in secret locations that do not permit the general public to visit. So I started off in doing that, built up the business to the point where we had filled all of our racks, and that set me on a journey to want to build larger facilities and more industrial scale mining, which is a whole nother ball game, because as you've rightly pointed out, we started off at this facility with a fantastic electricity rate, which obviously subsequently reset to closer to a market residential market rate. However, one thing I've learned on my journey is that if you want to mine effectively and at scale and profitably, you need to start working with sources of energy that are off the grid or outside of, behind the meter is the term we would use in the industry.
So I guess that's renewable energy. Australia has a whole lot of renewable energy. I'm going to be speaking with a gentleman after this conversation, Daz Beer, the author of Beers for Bitcoin. He works at a hydroelectric station up there in Cairns. We'll dive into the energy grid as well as solar and wind. When you specifically, Peers, are talking about working behind the meter, is it solar that you're going after? Here in Australia, we've got a lot of sunshine, or how are you trying to achieve that?
Yeah, generally speaking, I'm kind of agnostic about what source of power is the best from the point of view of just the economics. We look at things like, if you're going to go solar, the stark reality of it is that you get about 5.5 to 6 hours of sun per day. And that's when it's not rainy or cloudy. And you get different amounts of sun at different periods of the year. So if you consider a 24-hour clock, there's only a tiny sliver of the day in which you can actually turn your mind on. Now, some would say, well, you can combine your solar energy either with grid power, which, the solar being free in terms of your fuel, and the grid power being expensive. The blend of those two would enable you to lower your effective rate of power. Yes, that's true, but it's still quite an expensive rate of power, even when you combine the two together. And so others would say, well, why don't you combine it with a battery? Well, the simple fact of the matter is that to power one ASIC, like an S19, a standard S19, chews about 3 kilowatts of energy per hour. And to store energy in a battery, like a giant lithium-ion battery, the average cost of capital that you would put towards a battery project is somewhere around $750 to $1,000 per kilowatt hour of storage. So to create the storage that you need for 1 hour of runtime of one S19, you need about $3,000 of battery storage.
Wow.
And to then buy an S19 costs about $3,000 in today's prices and markets for an average S19, run-of-the-mill one. So, you're sort of stuck between, well, do I buy the storage for just one more hour of operation, or do I buy another ASIC that can instead run for the full 5.5 hours that I've got sunshine for? So it becomes an economic equation when it comes to solar. By far and away, though, the kinds of power source that you're chasing, if you're wanting to build an off-grid environment, the very best of all sources of energy right now, from an economics and an environmental standpoint, would be landfill gas. So that's the holy grail for people in our industry. So landfill
Yep.
gas, the rationale for that is you're as a power station, your power station is essentially funded to some extent by the ratepayer, the local council ratepayer. They've got a whole bunch of rubbish. They need it put into a hole and covered up and buried. So there's already companies that do that. They cart away all your waste. You bring the waste, i.e. the fuel, and you put it in a big reactor, which is a pit in the ground with an envelope around it. And for about 50 or 60 years, you stick a straw in this big bag of rubbish, and out the straw pops methane gas, sour methane gas. It needs to be cleaned, but then it can be burnt in a generator, and that gets rid of the methane and converts methane into CO2. And in the process, you're generating power at probably the cheapest price that you can possibly generate in the market. So, standard home electricity bill, you would see that the cost you pay per kilowatt hour is somewhere between 25 to 35 cents, depending on where you live and whether you're on a time of use charging basis. But in terms of what it actually costs to produce that power at, for example, a landfill gas station, because you are being paid to produce your power station, and because you're being paid to take your fuel, your cost of actually producing the power is somewhere around 2 to 3 cents potentially.
Wow.
And at that rate, obviously, you would love to have that power, but to deliver it to your home takes an additional, quite an additional amount. So somewhere around about a 10x increase in what you actually pay at your electricity meter. So that's why of all the different power sources that you can choose, you would ideally pick landfill gas. Failing that, other sources that are economically really viable are obviously and environmentally friendly, I guess, would be hydroelectric. But you need to be sure that you've picked a hydroelectric station where there is year-round water. So some hydroelectric stations have a fluctuating amount of energy that they can provide. And at some points, if there's a drought or if there's non-normal seasonal rain, you just may not get the continuity of supply that you're hoping for. And others, you've got no problem whatsoever. So we've looked at sites in Peru, for example, where you would have year-round power, no problems whatsoever, never an interruption likely. Failing that, obviously, you're looking for natural gas sources of supply that are usually where you either drilling for oil, and then there's additional flare gas that comes out of the well, or natural gas pipelines, or sites where you would normally go and drill for natural gas and connect that natural gas supply to a pipeline network. So those are the main sources of supply that you would go looking for. And you're looking typically for sources of energy that at the moment no one can use. And throughout Australia, there's lots of opportunities to do this because it's very difficult at the moment to set up a new power station and get it connected to the market. You're talking about multiple years, multiple millions of dollars of investment required just to get a power station hooked up to a grid.
And all the red tape and the regulation as well in Australia. We're a pretty bubble-wrapped country. My words, not yours. But a couple of the things, Peors, that I pulled out of that is it's extremely addictive when you do start getting into the Bitcoin mining. But then once you do that, and it doesn't matter if you're mining in one of the most expensive countries in the world, you start to get creative and look at ways where you can reduce that cost of mining. You are talking about chasing after stranded energy. The landfill, is really exciting. I've seen some videos in other places in the world where they are doing this already. Is chasing the methane gas and landfill, is that already happening in Australia, or is that process
Yeah,
starting? Is that opportunity something that
absolutely. Yeah.
will...
So this has been done already. Yeah, I probably can't talk about specifics or names of companies, but there's a fairly well known in the industry facility that's been set up down in Victoria, and there's also a facility being built here in Queensland that we're involved in assisting making happen.
Yeah.
And that will all be energized before the end of this year.
How is this possible? Are you approaching local government, local councils and saying, hey, you've got a big pile of rubbish here. You can be making money. We can be paying you to have it sitting there. This is what we want to do. Is that how you approach it? Is that how the conversation starts? Because it's for people that haven't heard this conversation, you say, we want to make power out of your rubbish to mine this digital electronic currency. People may think you're whack, Peors. How's that conversation start?
Absolutely. I mean, that's not how anyone in the industry opens the conversation, because if you try and conflate the concept of Bitcoin with what it is you're trying to do, unfortunately, people who've not been educated or haven't really sought out the information about what Bitcoin is, and if their education so far has been through the general media, and they haven't really been exposed to people who've done the work. Unfortunately, they're just not going to get it. And the conversation becomes about Bitcoin and not about what you can provide to the energy provider as a facility. So, the things that excite energy providers are the fact that you're coming on site to provide a flexible load that will pay them a floor price at all times of the day and the night. You can provide a positive price for their energy that they're producing. So you've got to understand that, and I'm sure my friend Daz will make this even clearer. There are times in the grid where you must at all times have the supply and the demand balanced and in equilibrium on the grid. But some generators, such as landfill gas and even natural gas wells, at all times you have to be moving that equipment. You cannot easily turn on and off these generators. They have to keep operating if you possibly can. They just do not like being shut down. Yet at different times of the day, prices on the grid, the spot price, can go negative. In other words, you pay to put energy on the grid. So there's a commercial disincentive to produce power and put it onto the grid at different times of the day, particularly because we have so many solar panels and windmills are starting to contribute to the grid. There are times of the day when you literally pay to put power on the grid. And so what we provide to an energy provider is a mechanism for them to, at those times when Bitcoin mining could be paying more than what they would receive if they were selling that same energy onto the grid, including a negative price territory, it's a no-brainer for that energy provider. So it doesn't have to be about Bitcoin. That just happens to be further down in the value chain. That there's a Bitcoin story there. We tend to use the word data center because it's less contentious. It makes people sort of focus on the actual benefit we are providing, and later on they can discover, well, what's inside the data center. Really, it should be agnostic as to what the use of the energy actually is, provided the economic equation stacks up.
One thing that I'm curious about is when you're approaching these power generators, so it's a company that's already creating energy in the landfill, and then you're just going there and providing a base load for them that they can switch on and off.
Load. Yep.
Flexible load. Absolutely fantastic. I want to loop back to the start, or earlier in the conversation. You said you got into this journey by building a node. What was that journey like, coming from a software engineering background? Was it fascinating, you found a little bit boring, or did that start this journey into the Bitcoin mining?
It was surprisingly easy, and it was so easy that I thought, well, because at this stage I really didn't understand the difference between Bitcoin and all the other cryptocurrencies that were out there. So one of the things that I did shortly after figuring out how to build a Bitcoin node, I thought, oh, I'm going to figure out how to build an Ethereum node as well. Why not? And see what's involved in that, not for no other reason than just curiosity. And then I quickly discovered how different Bitcoin was from just about every other one of these categories of digital currencies that are out there. In that, as I delved into trying to figure out how to set up an Ethereum node, it involved purchasing 32 ETH tokens, which at that time would have been $100,000 of investment just to shill out to the network. To get hold of some tokens. You don't need to buy any Bitcoin in order to run a Bitcoin node by comparison. I would also have needed some quite expensive computer gear to set up, and you kind of need a spare data center like this one to set it up in. Plus, you need hundreds of hours of time to study how that protocol works. Because one of the things that happens, one of the consequences of getting it wrong, if you don't follow the rules of the network and you don't adapt to whatever updates you're asked to provide, is that your 32 ETH that you just staked could get slashed. In other words, taken away from you if you don't play by the rules that the rulers make. Whereas Bitcoin is obviously a permissionless network. You can run whatever software you wish on whatever hardware you want. And I guess there's no other way of learning that as viscerally as I did than having a go at doing both and contrasting the two that way.
Yep. So I guess that's my next journey as well, is to be able to build a node. How do you go down that? Where does somebody even start to be able to build a node? But why would they want to build a node? And why should people build nodes or have nodes, purchase nodes?
Yeah, so apart from the fascinating learning that you get from building one, which literally takes, half an hour of installing software you download from the internet onto hardware that you can buy from any hobby shop, or even an old laptop would probably do the job. The technical barriers are very, very low to set it up. But the functionality that you get is quite profound. So if you value privacy and sovereignty, if you wish to be anti-fragile in how you operate your Bitcoin, then what a Bitcoin node allows you to do is to pair up your wallet, where you store your Bitcoin, with your node. And what this enables you to do is be completely independent from any third party. You're directly interacting with the Bitcoin network by linking your wallet to your node. So no one on the planet can tell what transactions you personally are doing when you connect your wallet to your node.
If I was to break it down into an image, and correct me if I'm wrong, Peors, it sort of sounds like your Bitcoin, if you were to imagine Bitcoin as gold and the node as a vault around you, and you're the one now that has the key to the door to be able to let that Bitcoin go in and out, or the gold go in and out of the vault, and to be able to broadcast that on the network. Because you have that node, that key to the door, there's nobody else that's in the way. You don't need to ask anyone to be able to move your Bitcoin. Is that a fair enough way to be able to explain it visually?
That's not too far off the case. So your Bitcoin is essentially controlled by your seed phrase. I'm holding up a test one here. Don't try and use this wallet, but you would have 12 words and or a multi-signature or a passphrase with or a single signature. But that's essentially the key that gives you the ability to sign transactions to move your coins around. But there will come a point where you want to move your coins. And when that's the case, if you have your own node, you can literally transmit from your node. You can broadcast to the rest of the network your transaction. If, for example, you're using something like a ledger or a Trezor, what most people don't realize is that when you try and send a transaction from your ledger, you're actually reliant on Ledger's servers being online. And also, there is the risk that Ledger would be in a position to be able to track and trace the fact that a device with the serial number that they sold you, that potentially is linked to your profile in their CRM, their customer relationship management system.
Yeah.
There is a potential that that serial number is linked in the data packets that are sent to their servers to say, hey, please add this transaction to the blockchain. So there's a potential that Ledger could potentially harvest, or a business like this could potentially harvest all of the information about all of the transactions that are taking place on your hardware wallet device.
Cool.
By running your own node and your own hardware wallet and signing device, you're essentially making sure that the only person on the planet who can track and trace what you personally are doing is yourself.
Okay, so let's go a little bit deeper here with that. So Ledger had a data hack, and everyone's address got leaked, their name, their email. I had Ledger at that stage. So people that are using a Ledger and they've got a node, should they be switching their Ledger out and using a different form of hardware wallet, maybe a cold card or something? What is the best? And this is not financial advice, this is just education, this information, this is an opinion. But what's the best way to be able to go about this for somebody's privacy and security and freedom going forward? Because we don't want someone like Ledger to be able to get in the way and to be able to be like, Sean is sending his Bitcoin from A to B. They've both got ledgers. We know who they are.
Yeah, look, I don't have anything too bad to say about Ledger. I think their hearts are in the right place most of the time. They look like fantastic products. For most Bitcoiners, it's probably their first experience of a hardware wallet will be a Ledger, and I've certainly recommended and helped people set up and install their wallets in the past on Ledgers. It's a great on ramp, and while you have a small number of coins or non-meaningful amounts of Bitcoin, that might well be that is certainly better than having your coins on any form of exchange where you're trusting others to look after your coins. But there are fundamental flaws that I'm sure even Ledger themselves would acknowledge, and other companies who did similar things would also acknowledge. There's just flaws in their security model from the point of view that you don't always know what the software is actually doing, because a lot of these software platforms, of course, are closed source. You're not allowed to know how the wallet actually works. So there is an element of you trusting the wallet manufacturer. But there are people out there building projects that look crazy. When you're first starting out, you want the comfort and security of a brand name company that almost looks like you're dealing with the Apple of hardware wallets. But as you learn more and more about Bitcoin security, more and more you wish to you actually evaluate security differently. And so something like this, which I'm holding up right now, which looks like a hobby electronics project, because it is.
It looks like a Tamagotchi.
This is actually probably what I would consider to be the most secure solution available right now to Bitcoiners who wish to operate and run their own Bitcoin nodes and wallets. So this is literally a device called a seed signer, which is made up of individual electronic components that are nothing to do with Bitcoin. So what I'm holding up here is essentially a Raspberry Pi Zero, with a camera on the back and a screen and joystick on the front. And on board, it has some open source software that you can load up on an SD card and remove the SD card. The great thing about a device like this is it has no memory. No hard drive, if you like, attached to it. So there's no permanent persistent storage. which means that the moment you cut the power from the device, it instantly loses the seed words. And it's the seed words that you want to keep secret and off the internet and off any device that is ever going to come into contact with an internet-connected device.
So if it's removing the seed words off there, how you sign it's still holding the private key?
The ideal situation, of course, is that you never actually store your seed on anything electronic for any length of time, other than the time it takes to secure, to create and sign transactions and broadcast them. So once you've done that, you ideally want to remove any trace of your Bitcoin seed words from any form of electronic device. So I'll hold up here for you an example of the way you quickly can load a seed phrase into a device like this. Is you literally point the camera at that's on board the device at the QR code. It does the work of loading 12 or 24 words into the software. At that point, you can then sign transactions using, for example, Sparrow Wallet on your desktop. And obviously, I'm talking here not about what you would use to go and spend $5 worth of Bitcoin on your coffee. This is for big cold storage style transactions when you're dealing with large amounts of Bitcoin or life savings values of Bitcoin. So literally, when you have a system like this, this is where your Bitcoin lives. This is how you hold on to it. It doesn't exist electronically anywhere. And obviously, you can make multiple copies of this, and you can also set up what's known as a multi-sig, and that's where you have, for example, a 2 or 3 like this one. If I happen to lose one of these plates, there's still the other 2. And I only need 2 in order to be able to spend the Bitcoin.
A couple of different things you can do. You can separate those plates into various locations around the world as well, if it's going into deep cold storage or things like that for inheritance planning, things like that. So he talks about building a node, and then from that journey, you started building mines, Bitcoin mining machines. When did that journey start? What year was it? Was it early in Bitcoin's history, or when did you come into this space?
I like most people, we've all discovered it a bit too late, but we are early, right? So
we are, yeah.
I started getting serious about Bitcoin around about 2020, and wanting to learn more around about then, since then it's become an addiction that's become something that I've wanted to be involved in full time and move the industry forward in any way I can.
You weren't really around for the GPU miners, but when you built...
I've built GPU miners.
Okay.
The problem with GPU mines where at the epoch that I got involved was that you weren't able to directly mine Bitcoin on GPUs at that point. You had to mine some other intermediate coin, and you would get rewarded in Bitcoin for doing that. And look, as your knowledge grows, you realize, hang on a sec, I actually don't really want to support these intermediate coins anymore. And that's when you upgrade, I guess, to getting more involved in using ASICs, which are very large, very expensive machines that require a lot of energy and are very obnoxious to work with. They're noisy, they're hot. They're annoying to use, but they're extremely good at what they do. So if you look after them and look after them well, they'll look after you.
So one of the things that you do, Peors, is you sell equipment as well as advising people on there. I know very little about Bitcoin mining. You've mentioned the word S19 a couple of times. Is this just a miner that you'd be able to sell someone, they can plug it in at home and they're ready to go? Or is it a little bit more complex with the latest and greatest Bitcoin mining machinery?
Yeah, it's super important to me that before we'd even contemplate selling a mine, we'd want to be sure that you understand what you're getting into And we would try our very best to dissuade you from starting if your motivation is to make a profit. That being said, there are some circumstances where individuals may decide that, regardless of the economics, that they still want to be involved in mining. And the reasons that I've seen work for people that do want to do that is that they have an innate interest in mining itself, and they want to understand Bitcoin better by being involved in mining. That's a very worthwhile activity, as I know from my own experience. So another mechanism that makes it viable for some people is if they have a business where energy is one of their input costs in their business. It's possible for them to, I guess, on an after-tax basis, to be able to do all of their sums and justify, hey, by the time I deduct all of the costs of energy from my normal profit-making activities, I'm actually ahead by being involved in the mining business. So that's an element that can work for some business owners that have large warehouses and large electricity bills already. And then there's also the case where some people are motivated by privacy, and they really want to be able to acquire a stack, a continuous stack of KYC-free Bitcoin. So one of the real advantages of Bitcoin mining for people who are self-sovereign minded is that the coins that get generated by your mining rig when connected to a mining pool, those coins, at present at least in Australia, you do not need to register. There's no permission needed. There's no requirement to provide identification. So the coins that get sent to your wallet by the mining pool when you're mining have no KYC information attached to your identity. So you can put those coins in any address you choose. And they're, I guess, your coins, and no one on the planet other than you knows that you have them.
For everyone watching that doesn't know what KYC means, it means know your customer. Yes. There's another word that's thrown around, which is AML, anti-money laundering. These are bank terminologies or financial terminologies, which means they want to know what you're doing with whatever transaction you're doing at all times, basically. So, Peirs, if you're to sign up to a mining pool, you said they're not asking for any ID or anything at this stage. Do you know if that's going to continue to be that way, or is regulation going to come in and they're going to try put that red tape around there and be like, if you are mining Bitcoin, you're using a mining pool, we have to have that KYC information?
That's right. Look, that's already happened in other countries. I think it started off in Kazakhstan. There are countries around the world where mining is quite heavily regulated. There's countries like Paraguay where there's a specific tax on top of electricity that you use in your mining operations. So obviously, I would obviously encourage everyone to do their own homework about what the regulations are in their jurisdiction, and obviously make sure you follow the laws that are applicable. Obviously, in Australia, at the moment, there's no regulation around mining that we're aware of, mining Bitcoin. So at the moment, there is no differential treatment about how you use your energy under current regulations. I honestly think that's a good thing for now. But definitely, I think everyone who's involved in this industry needs to consider that regulations do change, and be prepared if it were to.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I want to say to everyone, and you touched on it, is follow the regulation, follow the law, pay the taxes, do what it is you need to do. Be a good citizen. You're living wherever you live by choice, or maybe unfortunately because you were born there, maybe you don't have the capacity to move away. But if you are in a country, you are required to follow those laws. And saying that, hypothetically, if they were to bring in regulation and stuff, people within Bitcoin or yourself, with a software engineering type background, could potentially get a little bit creative. Is there things like VPNs and stuff where people that are theoretically doing their Bitcoin mining, it looks like they're in a different country or whatever, and maybe they just implement things like that for an extra layer of security or privacy on top?
Yeah, I think you have to do your own homework about the VPN technology that you're using. A lot of people, unfortunately, have misconceptions about what different VPNs provide. So some VPN providers have it's well known that they actually track and trace your activity, and can tie that back to your identity. So the protection that you think you're getting, or the privacy that you think you're getting from a VPN, isn't necessarily there, depending on the provider that you're using. So when you are selecting a provider, and I'm not going to make any comment about a specific provider. There's plenty of information out there on the internet about which provider is in which category. But there are different providers of VPN technology that do accept Bitcoin, which is an anonymous payment method, and therefore protects your privacy. If a VPN provider is taking payment through a credit card, obviously, a credit card provides information to the payment provider as to that could be linked back to your identity. So if you think that you're getting privacy from a commercial VPN provider that's requesting payment via a credit card, then obviously you can form your own conclusions.
So we've touched on a lot here. Bitcoin mining, it's bloody addictive. I need to go away and I need to build a node. That's my biggest takeaway. I'm going to encourage everyone that has watched this video. So yeah, mate, I can't wait. Maybe even we film it and we build it on camera and share that with people. I think that'd be...
We actually provide that as a service. Yeah, so obviously back in our data center, we do host mines, but we also host nodes. So most people start off when they are producing their own node with something like a Raspberry Pi, a bigger version of this, with a hard drive attached to it that stores a blockchain. So the whole purpose of a node is to make it very cheap and accessible and easy for people to get on board with the smallest amount of hardware imaginable. That's a fantastic outcome, and that's what makes Bitcoin so democratic as a network, or so ubiquitous as a network. But we've actually gone a bit the other way here in this data center, where we provide really souped up, really beefy nodes that have massive amounts of RAM, very, very fast CPUs, and super resilient. So if one piece of physical hardware fails, we can fail over automatically the virtual machine that's hosting your node onto another machine. So we provide that as a service, so that people that perhaps don't know or don't want to know how to set up and run a node can simply rent one.
I think that's probably a real good way to lead into where can people reach out to you? Where can they find you? Where can they get more information? Because what you're doing, if people are involved within Bitcoin and want to know more, this is how Bitcoin exists. It's the technology, it's the mining, it's the nodes. So if you want to let everyone know where they can find more information.
Our website, mineracks.com, everything we do is on there. You can see a video of our facility in Brisbane, which is I guess a bit of a showroom for the kind of work we do. We also help energy companies produce a more industrial, containerized scale version of what you see behind me. And we do provide custody and training in self-custody services, wallets, etc. Everything on our website. We've got an online shop where you can order everything that you need to set yourself up with a highly secure self-custody solution. On Twitter, I'm at MineRacks, and on Telegram at MineRacks. All DMs open.
Fantastic. I'll link that below for everyone. Peors, it's been an absolute pleasure. What's the key takeaway that you'd like to leave with the audience here?
Mining's fun. Get into it if you can, but keep your eyes wide open the whole way through. And one thing I would not do is ever get involved in cloud mining. Always it's your mine or it's not your mine.
Everyone watching, thanks very much. It's been an absolute pleasure, Peors.